there's some bad news for Pfizer that came out from a study by the FDA. Now, for the censors, I am spreading news that came from Joe Biden's Food and Drug Administration. Let's get into it. Hey, everyone. Welcome back. Okay, so a study was done by the FDA that found that the Pfizer COVID vaccine may cause older people's blood to clot. The study looked at data from over 17.4 million older Americans who got the jab between December 2020 and January 2022. Now, the study, because we try to be accurate here, the study did not conclude that the Pfizer vaccine causes blood clots. Rather, the study shows that there is a link to blood clotting in older people who got the jab. So, in other words, the study by FDA researchers of Medicare and Medicaid data, they showed that in 4 categories, including pulmonary embolism, blood clots, that there was a moderately elevated risk after the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine was given to people ages 65 and older. Now, even so, this is the first time that our federal government has admitted that the vaccines could possibly, maybe sort of, be harmful and have some harmful effect on people that take the jab if they're elderly. So that makes it news. So if you were an elderly person living in a nursing home and you didn't have a Democrat governor shoving COVID positive patients into your room, if you got the vaccine, you could possibly have gotten a blood clot instead. Okay, so now that the disclaimers are out of the way, let's get on with it. All right, the data showed that pulmonary embolism, or blood clotting in the lungs, met the initial threshold for a statistical signal and continued to meet that criteria after a more in-depth evaluation. Folks, this is something that people have been saying for 2 years now, and many of us, me included, got censored on other platforms for talking about it. We weren't allowed to talk about this, and now the FDA is saying, you know what? Yeah, you were right. Now, is it me, or does it seem like a real strong coincidence that the FDA came out with this after Anthony Fauci's announcement that he's leaving government? Now, I know Fauci's not involved with the FDA, but it just seems kind of weird that they would come out with this information now. I don't trust anybody in government anymore. So the FDA said that the results, quote, are still under investigation and will require more robust study, end quote. So no action is being taken on the results because they do not prove that any of the 4 outcomes are caused by the vaccines. Now, I don't know how they can not see that, though. All right, so some people are shocked by this news because the vaccine was once thought to be safe and effective in order to protect yourself against the virus. Now, conservatives tried to warn people, though, but nobody listened to us. Now, it's funny because while the leftists and the totalitarian authoritarian types kept telling us that the CDC was God and what the CDC said was gospel truth, and they were pushing that the best way was to get a vaccine. There was nothing wrong with the vaccines. They were not causing problems other than outliers. Meanwhile, unlike the leftists out there, the conservatives all along were keeping an eye on the VAERS system that was reporting thousands upon thousands of problems that people were having with the jab. Now, the VAERS system is maintained by the CDC, the same CDC that was God and gospel truth. And yet, if conservatives spoke out with information that came from God and the gospel truth, they were canceled or censored or punished in a myriad of different ways. Now, here's something. The FDA asked doctors to talk to their patients about the possible risks of the jab, but to keep promoting it as a safe and effective way to protect against COVID. Now, at the same time, the FDA told the doctors and nurses to keep an eye out for any signs of patients' blood clotting. So they were worried about older people suffering from blood clotting from the jab, but they wanted doctors and nurses to continue to push it anyway and telling them that it was safe and effective. Now, NPR came out with a piece last year that they pointed out that Pfizer and Moderna collaborated on a clinical trial for efficacy and safety on the vaccines early on. Okay. Now, during that clinical trial, the FDA gave emergency use authorization, EUA, to Pfizer and Moderna. And the asshat clown doctor who was running that trial contacted everyone in the control group and told them that they did not get the vaccine. And from what I understand, out of over 600 people in that control group, only 2 of them did not run right out and get vaccinated right away. Okay? So the clinical trial for safety and efficacy or effectiveness of the vaccines was destroyed by the very people who were running it because they intentionally lost their control group. And this was done by NPR. This was a story that NPR wrote. Harrison was the guy that wrote it. He's their biology guy, I guess, their medical guy. Anyway, so it turns out that they intentionally lost the control group for safety and efficacy. And yet they continued making you sign your little waiver when you had to get the shot so that you couldn't sue the living hell out of them. Now, I bet the people who had to sign that waiver to get the jab, they didn't see that in the instructions. And people wonder why conservatives don't really trust this government. Okay, so we have the FDA, the federal government, Joe Biden's federal government, telling us that, yeah, there could be a link between the Pfizer vaccine and people getting blood clots who are older, elderly patients. Okay, so remember, folks, this is big news because this is just the beginning. Okay, so they always come out, and then later on it'll be, no, you're a conspiracy theorist. They didn't say that. I mean, there's already fact checks out there saying that's not what they said. Well, it is what they said. They said that they didn't say that it caused the blood clots because they have to do more studies. What they did is they found something in there, markers that would say, you know what, these elevated levels, you know what, that we found them in patients. What they do is they look for commonalities among patients. And this commonality came up and it said, you know what, it could be everybody that got the jab, the Pfizer jab, they had elevated levels that led to pulmonary embolism. So let's take a better look at it. So it is definitely new. So I just thought you wanted to know that. So that's it. Thanks a lot for being with us, and we'll see you in the next one.
Welcome to my party, we're just getting started. A life is a dream or a nightmare scarring. Hand me a drink cause I think I'm going all in. Get me a shrink who can catch me when I'm falling. Cover up my scars, flip the handlebars, crashing in my car.